Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and we are talking about the Real ID that is taking effect today. And today we have the pleasure to talk to someone at RMV New York, Department of Motor Vehicle, Lisa Koumjian. She's the Deputy Commissioner for Communication and Customer Service. Mrs. Koumjian, good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Uh, did I say your name correctly?
Yes, you did.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Is there any other title you hold you would like to add on top of what I just said?
Nope, you nailed it.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'll start like by what is the Real ID, like this new document requirement that is taking effect today? What is it? What should we know, we understand about that?
Well, back in 2005, after the 9/11 attacks on our country, the 9/11 Commission proposed a series of recommendations, one of which being to standardize the way that various states issue driver's licenses or secure credentials like a non-driver ID. And so the Real ID Act was born out of that recommendation. It's taken quite a while for it to be implemented, obviously, but May 7th, 2025 is the day where it becomes officially implemented. And that means that anyone who chooses to travel by air domestically needs to have a Real ID or another compliant document to fly. There's lots of other things that someone can present to the TSA in order to board a plane, not just a Real ID, but from our perspective, that's what we offer at the New York State DMV. We also offer an enhanced ID, which is also Real ID compliant, but slightly different. And so those are the two documents that we offer. But TSA will accept a wide variety of other things, both US and foreign passports, for example. Those are probably the most common thing that people have in their pockets. They'll accept border crossing cards, permanent work authorization cards, permanent resident cards, more than a dozen different documents that could be presented to get through the TSA checkpoint.
So you describe a range of documents accepted by the TSA. Then why is it necessary to have the Real ID?
Only necessary if you want to have it. If you do have a driver's license issued from New York State and you want to have a Real ID and you meet the eligibility requirements, we'd love to have you get that. A lot of people generally use their driver's license or non-driver ID at the security checkpoint at airports. So that's generally what most people have in their pocket. That's what they're accustomed to bringing to the airport. So for a lot of folks, it's a convenience. It's a matter of convenience to have that in their pocket and ready to go when they want to board a plane.
So,
But
so
go ahead.
yeah, so having the Real ID is not a must. So it's something that is optional.
It's optional. What's not optional is having a compliant document that TSA will accept at the checkpoint.
So what is the difference between the Real ID, standard ID, and enhanced driver's license?
A standard ID is not for federal purposes, and if you were to get one today, it's marked that way, so it cannot be used at the airport. A Real ID costs nothing more than the regular license fee, whether you're renewing or you're getting a driver's license for the first time or a non-driver ID for the first time. There's no additional cost to get a Real ID, but there are certain federal requirements that you have to meet. So when you come to the DMV to get a Real ID, whether it be a driver's license or a non-driver ID, you have to bring proofs of your name, your full legal name. So unfortunately, if you're like me and you hate your middle name, it's got to be on your document if it is your legal name. You have to prove your residency. You have to prove your social security number or prove that you've never been issued a social security number, and you have to prove your date of birth. So there's a wide variety of things, documents, supporting documents that you have to bring to the DMV. That's the biggest difference.
You talk about some of the requirements, and I know for our community, like immigrant communities, is there any requirement to be legally present in the United States in order to have the Real ID?
Yes, and that's a federal requirement. So you do have to be legally present. But if you are here, even on a temporary basis, if you have a temporary work authorization or a temporary student visa, for example, you can get a real ID for the duration of your stay in the country.
So if you are like say it's people who are TPS holder, like temporary protected status, or and then now it's not clear when the TPS would be expired. And I'm not inviting you in a debate about immigration. So how long will you get the real ID for if you just go to the RMV and say you have a TPS? Now it shows that the TPS will be expired on next year on February 26th, but the federal government got like 6 months of it. So how long will I get the real ID with a case like that?
I think it's case dependent. And when you come to the DMV, our examiners, our motor vehicle representatives will look at everyone's documentation in great detail, and they'll determine based on what you bring to the DMV what your potential eligibility dates would be.
So for someone who is in the US but not legally, so has some legal problem,
Mhm.
what kind of ID would they be qualified for if they meet all the requirements living in the state of New York?
Well, again, it depends on a case-by-case basis, but even if they're not able to get a real ID or an enhanced ID with us, they maybe still have something that they can use to board a plane, like a border crossing card, as I mentioned. So there's different things. Anyone I would encourage to go on the TSA website, and there is a whole list of acceptable documents that can be presented at a security checkpoint at an airport. So things that the DMV doesn't offer, but someone may also have access to.
There's the real ID is a federal requirement. Does the federal government control it at the RMV? Do they have a department like it's only for federal government if you're going to have the real ID, or it's the same state employees that process it?
Yeah, for a real ID issued by the New York State DMV, those are our state employees who are processing those. What the federal government did was through the Real ID Act, they established minimum security standards that all states must meet in order to issue a real ID. So there was an approval process that we had to go through, and all 50 states and the District of Columbia had to go through to make sure that our real IDs would be accepted by the federal government. We did that back in 2017, and we've been issuing real IDs since then. As I mentioned, our enhanced ID is also acceptable for real ID purposes, and that has been issued since 2008. The difference with the enhanced is you do have to be a citizen to get an enhanced ID. And it does allow the biggest difference between a real ID and enhanced ID. The enhanced allows you to travel at border crossings with Canada, Mexico, and some Caribbean countries.
What kind of information stored in the real ID for someone who have the real ID and the federal government? What information stored in it, and does the federal government have access to those information?
I mean, it depends. Nothing more than if you were to come in and get a driver's license with us, even a standard, that information is the same. I mean, the Real ID doesn't provide the federal government any access to information they otherwise wouldn't have access to.
So the reason I ask is because like we here now, our federal government have agreement with a bunch of other federal agencies like USPS, IRS, or that to share immigrant data with them. So
Mhm.
a lot of people in our communities asking if I go get the real ID, would that mean that I will give more information to the federal government about me? Jeopardize our situation.
No more than if they were to come in and get a standard ID.
So that's the same requirement as the standard ID, and the state is not like obligated to share any kind of document with the federal government about someone who will come to get the real ID.
Right. And there's specific rules in place in New York State to safeguard our customers' information and data.
Is there's no penalties for people who choose not to get the real ID? I know there are some of the questions would be sound like repetitive, but for people in our community, we just want to make sure because we did some webinar recently, and people they were panicking, thinking that if someone doesn't have any real ID, they are going to be in some trouble. They won't be able to drive. They won't be able to do this or that. So now we want to make it clear that everybody understands. That's why I come up with some of the question in other form. So
Yeah.
there's no penalties for someone who choose not to get the real ID.
That's a great question. And you're right. There are no penalties if you don't have a real ID. It's not required, it's not mandatory, completely optional. But as I said before, if you do want to fly domestically, you have to make sure that you have at least a real ID or some other type of documentation that is accepted by the federal government.
Uh, how much it costs to get like the real ID instead of the standard or any driver's license?
Depends on the person and where you live, but there's no additional cost to get a real ID. It's the same fee as getting a standard driver's license or non-driver ID.
For people who are traveling, like they choose to travel by train or other public transportation, or just drive their own car. So
Mhm.
there's no such requirement if they are going to move, like go to another state. It's only for like point of like federal point of contact, like airports or someone who just come to the border if you go to Canada or things like that.
Right. The Real ID only applies if you're flying or if you're entering certain secure federal buildings.
So what would you tell like someone right now undocumented immigrants and coming just tell me the basic behind what we know right now about the real ID. What should I do? I don't like it. I don't want to have it. What would you just respond to?
I would say it's every individual's choice. There is no mandate to get a real ID. It's optional. But if you are planning to fly, I would, make sure that you have what you need to be able to get through the security checkpoint. Otherwise, you face, the possibility of not being able to board the plane, or you will likely go through additional security screening at the airport.
What are the conditions in general to have an ID in the state of New York? I'm not talking about the real ID. Like, can anyone who live in New York, if they can prove they are living in New York for more than 6 months and they just go walk into any DMV office, have an appointment, have an ID?
Right. And I mean, again, if you've committed serious driving offenses, that's one situation. But putting that aside, generally speaking, yes, anyone in New York State who qualifies and meets the eligibility requirements can get a driver's license. Of course, that means they have to take a written test to get a learner permit, and then they have to pass a road test. But assuming all of those conditions are met, under New York State's green light law, anyone, regardless of your citizenship, is eligible for a driver's license in New York State.
Can you enumerate some of the driving offense on top of your head, if you can remember, that can prevent someone from having an ID in New York?
That is not my bailiwick, so I won't even wade into those waters because I'm not sure off the top of my head what specifically disqualifies you.
Great, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk to you. Is there anything, yeah, I did not ask you, if you know it's important for us to know?
I would just encourage anyone who's considering getting a real ID, please go on our website. There's a wealth of information there. We have a document guide that can help walk you through exactly what you might need to bring into the DMV in order to get a real ID. And that's tremendously helpful in making sure you're prepared. The last thing we want is someone to wait to get an appointment and then finally get into an office and they don't have what they need and we have to turn them away. So we want to make sure everybody is well prepared, and our website is a great way to do that.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It was a pleasure to be with you, and I hope we'll have other opportunity to talk to you again. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.